Look at this photograph. For decades, the baseline image of the American household and economic unit has looked exactly like this. Mainstream feminist theory has spent decades taking this model apart, arguing that the traditional nuclear home traps women in domestic servitude and restricts their personal autonomy. But that critique carries a massive historical blind spot. It assumes that escaping the family unit is the ultimate goal, which makes sense if you are already living comfortably inside that model. For marginalized groups, however, escaping the family is nowhere near the top of the priority list. For LGBTQ individuals and people of color, the American government actively steps in to prevent their families from forming in the first place. We end up with two completely different realities. While one movement views dismantling the traditional home as a victory, another group goes through a grueling daily fight simply to keep their loved ones under the same roof. When a community is forced to forge kinship under that kind of pressure, they create what we call the Liberatory Family, a network forged through active resistance. You cannot apply a single universal critique to kinship. When the state writes policies specifically designed to tear your family apart, keeping it together becomes a revolutionary act. To understand why that resistance is necessary, we have to trace how the government has historically managed people of color through highly gendered and racialized systems of control. This document is an 1858 auction poster. It lists enslaved human beings, like a woman named Martha, along with her children, Ned, Nancy, Horace, and Mary, being sold on a long credit sale. Legal systems intentionally erased and broke family bonds by classifying individuals as property. After abolition, the tactics shifted to keep the newly freed population in line. The state built new legal architectures designed to criminalize black men, resulting in prison doors slamming shut on massive segments of the population. That system was deeply calculated. While men were locked away, the state preserved the labor market for black women by systematically funneling them into low-wage domestic service. By the late 20th century, the state's approach shifted toward neoliberalism, a market-driven framework that dismantled social safety nets. This economic shift effectively ended the Family Wage Pact, replacing it with a system relying on low-wage labor and mass incarceration to manage marginalized populations. Women of color are routinely pushed into substandard wage labor, trying to hold households together, while state interventions actively pull those same households apart. That modern intervention looks like mass incarceration, invasive neighborhood policing, and repressive deportation policies, where family members are physically bussed away from their communities. For communities of color, the family has never functioned as a vehicle for patriarchal comfort. It has served as the primary mechanism for survival against a system designed to render them expendable. In direct response to that ongoing hostility, women of color have acted as the primary bulwarks, actively redefining and protecting their kin. If we map out this new structure, the Liberatory Family explicitly rejects the single-earner model. The strict boundaries of the nuclear household dissolve, reaching outward to include extended relatives and non-traditional partnerships. This wider network serves a highly practical purpose. It is a strategic necessity, built to absorb the economic and social shocks inflicted by hostile state policies. Redefining the family this way changes how we understand political action. Workplace struggles for living wages directly determine whether a family can remain intact. In the same way, pushing back against invasive police presence is a fight to keep the family safe from external disruption and physical separation. Any genuine feminist movement today must throw its weight behind these existing struggles. Defending a family against the state requires a far more radical politics than simply rejecting the family unit altogether. This brings us to a stark contrast with mainstream reproductive politics, which usually frames rights through the lens of individual choice. The problem with measuring justice by choice is that it assumes the individual is already free from state violence and economic coercion, which we know is false for millions of people. To actually protect the liberatory family, we have to shift our political framework away from individual choices and focus on systemic freedom. Under this new framework, reproductive freedom means having the right to terminate a pregnancy, yes, but it equally guarantees the right to build, sustain, and keep a healthy family. Achieving that level of freedom requires specific, real-world conditions. Families need to exist without the constant fear of a partner being incarcerated, a child being deported, or starved by poverty wages. When we look at this diagram, we see that the workplace, the healthcare system, and the criminal justice system are heavily interlocked pieces of a single defensive strategy. Workplace organizing, prison abolition, and healthcare function as the unified architecture required to defend the liberatory family and build a